Gather round me, children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. Your doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. Vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Hi and welcome to Not Another Fake Newscast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Gerry. As always, you can find us on www.notanotherfakenewscast.com.
You can get us on our Facebook and Twitter at PGMcast, and if you want, you can support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/PGMcast.
Yeah, so we're here today for an interview with Ryan McCuaig, who is kind of came to prominence on social media via a kind of wee viral BBC video that was done. But Ryan has had an incredibly interesting and inspirational life experience, and we're very pleased to have him here today to talk about that. So, Ryan, would you mind introducing yourself to the listeners and explaining kind of this little phenomenon that kind of brought you to the attention of people on social media?
Hi, thanks for having me. As you said, my name's Ryan McCuaig, and I did a video with BBC The Social, which sort of focused on my background as someone who grew up in Easterhouse, which is obviously one of the most deprived areas in Europe, I believe, or it certainly was when I was growing up.
For those who don't know, sorry to interject, but obviously some of our listeners are English or American or whatnot. Easterhouse isn't bra. no, but essentially Easterhouse is like one of those, you know, when you talk about like rough areas of specific cities, Easterhouse is one of Glasgow's rough areas, you know what I mean? It's the area of Glasgow that will, Easterhouse and Govan essentially are the two that will fall under the rough areas. In the event you were like, you know, where should you not go at 12 o'clock at night, you know what I mean, that type of...
I think actually at one point when we were growing up, Ian Duncan Smith, who I think was in charge of welfare at the Tory government at the time, was brought to Easterhouse to see the levels of poverty there, and actually it was reported that he was sort of broke down into tears and stuff. So it's the kind of a place that's sort of troped out as being poor and having bad outcomes and that sort of thing.
Oh, I mean, certainly it's that way. Yeah,
it's good to know that that experience really stuck with him and it changed his political life, and it made sure that he made sure that benefits went to like the people who really needed it.
Yeah, obviously it didn't have that much of an impact on.
Ian Duncan Smith looked at him and he was just like, lost cause, fuck it.
Anyway, sorry.
So sort of I grew up in that area, and I was I was in the care system when I was younger. So I'm care experienced, and for people who don't know what that definition means, you probably see it flying around on social media, and what it basically means is anybody who has had state intervention in their lives. So that can be from having social workers intervene in your childhood, from having like compulsory supervision orders imposed upon you by a children's panel, and quite often that happens, more often than not actually it happens because of neglect and abuse. A lot of people in the past have associated the children's panel with people who commit crime, and that's part of the stigma as a care experienced person that you face, but actually most of the time it's because of things that are out with your control. Care experience also covers people in kinship care, so that's when the state decides to put you in members of your family who are not your parents, and then right through to the sort of a stereotypical things you would see in the media like residential care and secure units. So that definition is one which care experienced people have claimed for themselves, and my own experience was I had parental alcohol addiction, and my mum, that resulted in sort of neglect and abuse and childhood trauma and that sort of stuff, and I went into the care system when I was about 5, and I spent 2.5 years under the care of my local authority, with social workers intervening in my life and telling me who I could see, who I couldn't see, and obviously being shipped around various members of my family. And that kind of came to an end shortly after my mum died. She died when I was like 6 years old, and obviously there was some lasting impacts upon that. And basically, the video focused on the fact that I became so disengaged from education that I left school at 16 with zero sort of motivation, zero direction in life. I remember people talk about like your exam results coming as being like the biggest event in your early teens or whatever. I remember when mine came, I didn't even read them because that's just literally how little I cared, how little motivation. And at the time I thought I was just sort of that was just the way it was, because when you live in an environment where people are suffering the effects of poverty, aspirations to do things which are related to academia is very little. People around me, nobody in my family had ever done anything remotely academic. None of the people in my school were really academic. I mean, there was a small proportion of which, but it wasn't one of those schools that really sort of, I was like, we're going to get a big proportion of people into university. You know, I left school at 16 and I was in the vast majority of people in my year.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So curiously, like, both socially out with school but within school as well, like, the fact that you had grades or not was perceived socially entirely irrelevant. Like, I mean, essentially the people who were around you, most people weren't expecting to get like 5 A's at higher, or standard grade 5, standard grade 1s or whatever, which for our English listeners is a bit like GCSEs, is that what they still call them? O levels, A levels, whatever the right terminology is. GCSEs I believe it is, but essentially the equivalent thereof, the top mark of that, there was no aspiration to get that.
Yeah. And that's basically, in fact, it would actually be the opposite. You would probably, it would be hard to be academic at the type of school that I went to, because you would be in a significant minority, because it was just it was just a school that was plagued with problems related to poverty. So there was gangs, there was violence. You know, I'd witnessed people being attacked with weapons and stuff. Was a kind of a weekly occurrence at my school, and that's a sort of a thing. When you grow up in that environment, you become so desensitized to the ever pervading threat of violence round about you, because young men have to threaten each other, or at least portray the belief that people have, that they have the sort of a potential to be violent, because that's the only way that you got validation from your peers. So when my exam results came through the door, I didn't even read them, because I literally at that point in my life didn't even care, and I got something very average. Maybe 5 standard grades and 1 Int 2, which today's equivalent would probably be Nat 4, Nat 3, I don't know. I don't really know the current system well enough.
No, not really. I mean, like, obviously we are from Wishaw, not quite Easterhouse by any manner of means, but it's something that we bring up, certainly socially, not so much on the podcast, but like, I very much remember being at school and watching people getting into fights and being stabbed in the face with pencils, or a guy has a hacksaw blade, or a guy has shown up with a baseball bat, and it was one of those things where, it was one of those things where these are common occurrences. Like, to see a see a boy hit another boy with a table leg or the back end of a pool cue was not unreasonable.
I mean, like, primary school, there was a guy who went to primary school who ripped
a guy's ear off with a
badminton racket twice, actually, in a space of a year, you know. So yeah, like,
when I was in my first couple of years at high school, one of our close friends, associates, got macheted in the head along the street phase, and it was just that way where, and by far from being as bad as what essentially Easterhouse is perceived as, but like,
no, it was kind of the norm.
It's one of those things that you do become. It's the desensitised bit that I want to kind of focus on more than anything else. It's that way where it's just like, it becomes such a norm that you're just like, a guy gets stabbed, as opposed to, oh my god, as opposed to watching a person read the newspaper and see it's terrible that a guy in the middle of Glasgow on a Saturday night gets stabbed. Do you know what I mean? It becomes, you shouldn't need to deal with that as a child. Yeah. And if you're then dealing with it in a grander scale than we are, you're getting that unfortunate situation where it does become the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, when I was growing up, it wasn't uncommon for people around me to die very young. Die through suicide or die through murder. That was something that happened quite often. And the fact that I had been in care and stuff wasn't really, I wasn't really in a very significant minority in my community. You had people who had parental addiction problems all around us, because again, it's just another symptom of poverty. And what you have seen at round about the time was sort of a success of governments and people in power just sort of allowing these people to get on with it, and no really worrying about the outcome, or focusing on the acute symptoms of poverty, such as, you know, 1 week we would have an initiative based on gang violence, because we're all violent and we're all animals and we're all horrible, and not focusing on, well, why are people acting in that way? Because they're always under the threat of violence, because they're suffering the symptoms of poverty, and because they've been conditioned.
Violence begets violence, essentially. Like, if you keep on, if you're violent to someone is going to be violent in return. Essentially, it's a cycle.
Yeah. But it's also that the governments tend to focus policies on, as you say, it's like symptomatic occurrences. Like, so violence is a symptom of poverty. Drugs are a symptom of poverty. Poor health is a symptom of poverty. Like, all of those things, there'll be drives, policy drives to sort of
reactive policy rather than proactive policy always.
But there never seems to be a real policy drive against the root cause of all of those problems, which is poverty itself. So moving forward then, so when you left school at 16, what was your path after that? Where did you go?
Well, it's funny because I left school at 16 and I believed that I was, between the ages of 14 and 15, maybe to 16, I played football, and like most young guys growing up in that sort of community, I sort of hitched my entire life on becoming a professional footballer. Around about the age of 16, it wasn't really working out, and at that time, in Easter House, I must have been.
It's Brazilian Vavela, isn't it? Is that what it's like? There's not that many football teams that are looking for boys in Easter House.
What was your position?
I played centre mid, actually. So I fancied myself.
Position any can't keep playing this.
But it never worked out. And round about that time, you start to get into other things, because you start to be exposed to alcohol. You start to be exposed to, you start to take an interest in women, etc. And training on a Saturday morning and playing football on a Sunday morning becomes less appealing.
Doesn't it lend itself to in the park on a Friday?
Well, no, and no matter how much my dad tried, and I have to say that my dad was a really positive influence. He was a taxi driver for Easter House for 25 years. By no means a genius, or by no means somebody who was academic, but always let me believe that I could be anything that I wanted to believe. And when I get put into his care, once I came out of the care system, he remarried and I got a stepbrother and stuff, so I did have a wee bit of normality, but I did still become disengaged from education. I left school at 16 thinking that I would become an apprentice electrician, and I went to do a trial shift with a guy who my dad knew, and that lasted a week, and then he was like, actually, I don't actually have enough money to keep you on. So then I was just like, okay, I'm unemployed, I have to find a job. So I started working in like various jobs in offices. I just thought that would be, having had an experience of doing manual labour, I realised it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. I remember one time coming home and we had been drilling to like make a socket in a wall, and I remember sneezing and coughing up dust, and I just thought, nah, I don't want any more manual labour. That's not for me.
I mean, the thing is, obviously, for our listeners, know that I work in IT. Manual labour's not for me. One of the worst things in the world is pulling cables and cables, man. Like, for me, it's absolutely shite. Like, it's totally, it doesn't do anything for me in the slightest.
I've pulled some cables in my time, to be honest.
That's
not a you.
No. That's very much is. That's what Gerry does well in the rigs. You got to pull some cables if you want to fucking make it.
If you want to get ahead.
But if you want to get some heads, you have to pull cables. That's only fair. Seems like a deal.
Anyway, man.
Yeah, so I ended up working various. Moving on, I ended up working various offices and stuff. Jobs that I hated. I had really bad experiences in the workplace, and then I just sort of fell into a job working in an office in Glasgow. And I was working under this manager who was like a mother figure to me, and she really believed in me and really supported me, and probably the first time in my life I ever had unconditional support from a figure of authority. Now, teachers at my school, I don't want to blame them, because they were dealing with a very, very difficult situation, and essentially people used to joke that my school was like a gang fight that sometimes stopped for lessons occasionally. And that's obviously exaggerating it, but I mean, there was a lot of problems there. And
I mean, because of your young age and what you came up against, the fact that was an authoritative female figure who was supporting you as well probably makes a difference. I mean, essentially, not to detract anything from her as a female, but in the event you were presented with the same scenario as Emil, it probably wouldn't have made quite as much an impact on you. Do you know what I mean? Like, because of what you had dealt with previous to that.
That's absolutely right, and I think the fact that she was female, and because I'd obviously lost my mum at an early age, we did connect, and we used to joke and work that she was my ma and stuff, and she just basically believed in me and got me to believe in myself, and sometimes it takes somebody outside your family to really convince you that you can achieve. And she basically got the company that we were working for at the time to pay for me to go through some like qualifications, like industry qualifications, and I started like studying. The first time I'd ever studied, I never studied for exams at school, and I started like actually thinking, oh, this is quite enjoyable. I actually enjoy the learning process.
Can I ask what industry it was you were working in?
It was in it's insurance claims industry, so it was kind of an office based job, but there was a bit of like, you had to know a bit about like the law involved, you had to know a bit about like buildings and stuff, because it was sort of a like home insurance claims. So essentially I got a few qualifications. I was passing all these exams first time, started to really enjoy it, and then I basically used those qualifications, which, you know, had enough sort of a nationally recognised credits to sort of just take a punt, and I decided to apply to Strathclyde Law School. I'd always sort of liked the idea of being a lawyer, and I'd always sort of watched lawyers on the telly. I remember one very clear occasion when I watched there was a televised murder trial, a real murder trial, Scottish murder trial.
I was thought you were going to see O.J. Simpson.
No,
I could defend a murder, a guy who's murdered loads of people. I could do that.
Pretend the gloves don't fit you.
I just say, Disney, just say fucking you weren't there or that. You've not got a Bronco. Anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you come up with something that rhymes and that becomes I mean, that's pretty cool. But it wasn't that. It was an actual real murder trial. It was a retrial. And there was a lawyer on there who was the defence lawyer, and he's a guy called John Scott QC. He's currently chairing the inquiry into the miners' strikes, which is obviously a thing that affected Lanarkshire quite badly. So I watched him and I was just like, that's so cool, he's amazing, I want to be just like him. So I'd always had that idea, but I never thought it's possible. Like, people like me don't become lawyers, that's what I used to think. And then eventually applied to Strathclyde Law School, took a punt, and then one day just get an unconditional acceptance. So then I started university shortly after that. When I got there, I had major imposter syndrome, as I'm sure you can imagine. Like, coming from my background, essentially I couldn't afford to go there full time, even though the Scottish Government pay for your fees. Financially, I was not in a position to give up full time work, so I had to go at nights first of all. So the first year I was like working full time, and I was going in on a Tuesday and a Thursday night and then on a Saturday for like 4 hours. And I passed all my exams at the end of that, and I went to we had like a supervisor, a development supervisor, and I asked to go to the full time degree. They were really supportive, and they were basically said, if you get a high enough grade, we'll let you go on. So then I switched and I went on to the full time degree. So I went into second year of law school with the people who I'd never met before, because I was going at night. And I remember the first time I went to a lecture, and I just thought, like, I do not belong here, because it was just full of people who, first of all, were about 4 or 5 years younger than me, so that in itself was a wee bit intimidating. Yeah. And then you would sit in classes and people would be talking about like going on skiing holidays, and people would be talking about like, and you know, just things that I just found very intimidating, just things that were
alien
just completely alien.
But I mean, to interject quickly, what we spoke about before we recorded was essentially Dan, like Loki, the Scottish rapper, and very much that same scenario where he is now presenting himself in such a way where he sounds like a boy for like Easterhouse, you know what I mean? Like, he sounds like when he's talking. But what I mean is, like, for the listeners, it's neither here nor there. The point I'm getting is he sounds like a boy for Easterhouse, and but he comes across as articulate, and he comes across as someone who is well read and is educated. But when you stepped into this, as we were talking about, essentially, if you sounded like us, and me and Gerry can hide it well or whatever, because we're, you know, but if you sound like us in the most basic term, you're essentially, the reference point is like Rav C. Nesbitt on TV. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So like you will never be viewed as the intellectual.
What you mean is that Ryan doesn't necessarily have a role model in the public eye.
Oh, certainly. I mean, it certainly done.
Absolutely not. And that was the first thing that I noticed was my accent, and I used to read jokes on social media about having a uni accent, and all my pals, when they heard I'd go into uni, all my pals were all plumbers and joiners and whatever, so they were like, you better not come back with a uni accent and stuff.
Oh, it's the Glasgow uni accent. Like, I mean, the thing is, from people who aren't around here, that's the thing that they'll never really understand. That there is always a joke, especially from where we come from, is we'll go through school with a group of guys, and one will become a joiner, and 3 of them will come brickies, and one will become a roofer, and one of them will go to university in Glasgow, and they'll come back a year later and they'll talk to us, and we'll be like, man, you straight up didn't fucking sound like that last week. You know what I mean? Like, that's not your voice. But there is an accent that you develop to make you assimilate. It's an assimilation.
Yeah,
you know
absolutely,
what I mean?
and that's what people do. They mimic each other to try and fit in. But so that was the first thing I noticed, and it made me really self-conscious about speaking out in class. And also, I just felt like the kids who go to private school and go to uni, they're so much more prepared, because you know, people are paying good money to have them prepared education, to get them ahead. So like in first year, there were these people who were like 18 years old and they could stand up and do public speaking and stuff, and I was just like
6 years practicing debating.
Exactly. Whereas
part of their curriculum.
At my school, we didn't have a debating club. We didn't have any clubs.
Debating was a bit more shouty in the playground.
Well, yeah, that was the only debating we did was sort of a between
what are you cunts are rolling a fucking joint
or whatever. So it was like it was totally alien to me. But you mentioned Darren McGarvey, and I listened to your episode with him, which is very good. People should listen to it. One of those days when I was going to uni on one of those Saturdays, and I had never heard of Darren before, and I remember he was on BBC Radio Scotland, and I just heard somebody who had an accent who sounded like me, but he was just talking about things that really mattered to me, talking about poverty, talking about inequality, talking about class, and talking about it so eloquently. And that was like and I remember this, and I met him recently, and I told him about this, and I've probably told him it about 2 or 3 times, probably bored of hearing it, but that was really powerful for me. That was really inspiring, because I felt like, wow, that's somebody who is definitely from the scheme, is definitely working class, he's definitely just like me, but he's intelligent, he's astute, and people are listening to him, and he's putting across arguments which make sense to me. And that was really powerful, and I think that's powerful for a lot of people, and I think that to see people like you in the media is very important, because when I was growing up, there was nobody like me in the media.
I mean, see, I was just quickly, I would say that we're actually fortunate enough now where we are, that you've even had, not quite to the same level, but you've even had people like Kevin Bridges and Frankie Boyle, and essentially people who have who, as much as they sound like they've fallen at the Crystal Palace on a Tuesday night in the middle of town or whatever, like, they are quite educated. They're certainly sharp as fuck, even if they're not educated, so they can hold themselves in pretty much any debate, and they can.
But they're also promoting the same sort of ideals that we would hold.
Certainly, because I think everyone at this point that listens to us is very aware that we're probably left of centre. Certainly is how we would describe it. But they all are as well. And the thing is, like, that when we grew up, like I said, essentially, the only thing that I can actually think of is like Rabsy Nesbitt. What's the football one from New Year's? Only an excuse, and that type of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Essentially, that's what we get presented. That's, or as we were talking about earlier on, essentially a junkie or a drunk or a murderer or a homeless person that's on in London for a TV show.
Well, usually the baddies.
The baddies, exactly. But you didn't. But you were never presented. You were never presented with our accent, especially the west of Scotland. Our accent, like no Edinburgh by any man.
I think that's why, you know. So you're in a situation now where you've got a wee bit of a platform. You know, and you've got an opportunity to you potentially are going to be that for somebody else, you know, which I don't know if anybody's ever told you that before. They might have done, but it's a wee bit of responsibility maybe for
you're a Frankie Boyle. That's what we're saying. You're a Frankie Boyle.
No, but I mean, like, you might be a low-key to some of you guys sitting in the scheme somewhere in Glasgow right now. You know, he might hear you and think, oh, well, that guy's had a similar upbringing to me. You know, he can potentially be a role model for me. You know, if he can do this, then why can I not do it? So you got into uni, right? And I would say that when you were doing nights, like, that's quite a big commitment for somebody. How old were you at that time?
So at that time, when I first started, I would have been about 22, I think.
22, right? So you're properly into like going out and meeting lassies and having a drink and stuff like that. So you're at that point giving up your evenings and you're giving up a decent portion of your weekend too. So like you've sacrificed some things at that point to decide.
Oh, definitely. I mean, 22-year-old Paul was at the Arches. So, you know, read into that what you want.
You're absolutely right, and that's basically what it was. And the way I just tried to think about it was, I just saw this as an opportunity to just change my life forever. And I just thought, do you know what, see if I can get to the end of this year, then I'll do the next year, and if I can get to the end of that year, then maybe I'll actually be able to graduate with a degree. And to not have anybody around me who'd ever done that, I didn't even know really what would be expected of me. So I have to say the staff at Strathclyde Law School were just amazing, because they understood me and they understood where I was coming from. And I remember going to one of my lecturers, his name's Chris McCuaig, he's still at Strathclyde, he teaches public law, and we were having an introductory lecture to the part-time course, and they were doing like icebreakers, right? There was like nothing, and I went up to him and I was like, can you give me some tips on how to get a first, as in a first class degree, which is like the sort of a highest class you can get? And he sort of looked at me as if like what's wrong with you? Like we're doing icebreakers on an introductory class on a Thursday night or a Tuesday night or whatever. Why are you worried about that? And he just sort of laughed, but he gave me some really good advice about like engaging with the law, think about things critically, try and write as much as you can. And I really took that on board. And in him in particular, but other members of staff were sort of there for me all the way through my time at Strathclyde. And by the end, I graduated with a first class degree, which was probably the first day that I felt like I belonged there.
Yeah.
You know, when I was walking sort of across the stage, I was like, okay, well, it turns out I can actually do uni.
So
like people like me can do it.
How old were you when that happened, man?
So I graduated last year, so I was 26. 26. I might have just turned 27.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable.
You had a first class honours degree in law.
I did.
And I think it's reasonable to say there wasn't that many boys for your street that had a first class honours degree in anything.
No, that's the thing. Like I've tried to work out the statistics, because people always say to me like, you must be like one in whatever, and I don't like to think about it like that. Like what you said, Gerry, if people look at me and say I can do that because he done it, then that's to me is the best compliment ever.
Aye, none of that one in anything. The only reason it's one in anything is because nobody's fucking done it or been given the support or fucking knew that they could do it.
I do a wee bit of work. I do a wee bit of work with a charity called the Law Scott Foundation, which basically is a charity which was set up to help people from my background and who have suffered other structural barriers in life to try and get into law school. So basically what they do is they provide financial support and mentoring to people from low socio-economic backgrounds. So they told me recently that if you take just my financial background, so my socio-economic background as in my postcode and where I lived and the fact that nobody in my house was a graduate, then I'm 1 in 12 people like me get onto a law degree. So don't finish it. We don't know how many finishes it, but 1 in 12. But if you add in like being in the care system, I don't know what it would be, to be honest, because like only 4 or 6% of people that have been in care go straight to uni, and that's how much we know. And we have a lot of problems with self-identification in terms of care experience and stuff at uni, so we don't actually know how many people who have been in care and also have been in a sort of a deprived area like graduate. I actually don't know.
I mean, for me, I'd have thought that like, so because of where we come from, and you'll probably understand this as well, Ryan, but essentially like, see if you're in the pub, see the person who you meet in the pub who knows fucking more about law than any person you're ever going to meet in your entire life. He's like a traveller, or like a less than essentially a less than reputable person. So the thing that I find strange is essentially what you're talking about is like, see if someone has been presented with lots and lots of negativity, they've been in and out of systems, they've been dealing with, they've watched their family going through the court system. Like, in a lot of cases I have found through my life, those are the guys who I know who know law, and they know law like fuck, because they spent their entire, I mean, they were 10 and they were being taught law kind of by osmosis because like their dad was in and out of jail or they were going to court. You know what I mean? Like so, like there's lots of people out there that have the capability to fully understand the intricacies of law, but they tell themselves that they can't go through the university and that side of things yet. And
there's that. There's also the angle that, you know, in a lot of instances, you know, when you read about some of the laws that are still in place in this country, Scotland, to be fair, isn't as bad as England, but and Wales, and whatever. But obviously we have a separate legal system. But there are things that you read about, and the law, like the poor having no lawyers, but Andy Whiteman, have you read it?
I got it as a Christmas gift, but I haven't read it yet.
It's quite interesting because it's, you know, it's basically looking at, like you say, structural inequalities and stuff that's built into the system, and you know, in order to address those inequalities and to change things, we need people like you and people from our backgrounds getting into law in order to be able to change the law.
That's how I agree. But when people say things like that to me, it's nice, but at the same time it makes me really angry and makes me really frustrated because it's 2018 and I shouldn't be really seen as a one-off. I want to see...
No, you shouldn't.
I want to see more care experienced people going into uni. I don't want to be people who say to me like, oh, you're one and whatever, because that's rubbish. It shouldn't be like that, especially in a country where the government pays your tuition fees. You should be able to achieve what you've got to achieve based on your academic ability and not based on you know, your ability to pay. And as much as the government has done so much to equalise that playing field by paying tuition fees, which literally made it possible for me to go to university. So that particular policy for me is no up for debate. I will always defend that. But what I have...
That's lucky because you're a lawyer, so you actually can defend it.
But what I have faced is, you've got that structural inequality. Well, there's a barrier removed. But what I've actually faced throughout my time in education is I've actually realised that there are so many things, specific financial barriers, which people like me face if you're trying to go into my profession, and it happens in other professions, but I can only really talk for law students. So, for example, something that I was talking about recently is every law school has an annual law ball, they call it, right? And it's basically the social event of the calendar. So every law school has a wee law society, they call themselves, and they have an elected committee, and essentially what they do is they do networking events, and they liaise with local law firms and get them to come in and give people interviewing experience, and that's all brilliant, and it's really valuable for people who don't have access to lawyers. But what they also do is they have various social events, the law ball being the number one. Some of these law societies price admission to these law balls at £60. Some, it was never less than £50 when I was at uni. So I never went once because I couldn't afford to go, because that's £50 to get in. And alright, you probably get a drink and whatever else for that, but it doesn't include going and buying a tuxedo.
I've drank in various Strathy establishments. It's no cheap for drink.
No, exactly, and it doesn't include getting there. It doesn't include getting back. So I literally was excluded from that for being from background, for being care experience, for being poor, essentially excluded. Now people might say, well, that's just a party, but it's not a party, because it's an opportunity to network with the future of your profession, and it's an opportunity to create memories with people who might one day decide whether you get a job or whether you get work. And essentially what it allows people to do is perpetuate their own privilege from the start of their education all the way through their career. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time, but that's just a very easy example of where there are still so many financial barriers.
I mean, we can say definitely, whose name we'll not mention on this, but we have a friend that we went to school with who went into law. So he went to Oxford, and he'd done his Oxford stuff.
He went to Glasgow Uni.
He went to Glasgow Uni, and then he went to Oxford, and then he'd done some stuff in Italy, and then he went to Harvard. Right, he'd done a year in Harvard. Right, now I know, because he listens to our show. Right, anyway, so I know that he will say that definitely what he found it daunting. Not only, but not only
going to Oxbridge, going to Harvard.
But he also
and he only was able to go because of scholarships.
Yeah, but he would also tell you that the experiences that he had in Harvard and like Oxbridge and whatnot, you know what I mean? That scenario and go over there, like that set him up for a scenario where, like, when you walk out of the other side of it, you have met the right people, and you've shaken the right hands, and your name is known, and you know names and all that type of stuff, and being able to do that, he will definitely tell you that he's not. I mean, he done well in New York, so we're clear but he will tell you that. Don't get me wrong, as a person, he is very good at the whole education system. That's who he is. I should probably guess because of the scenario they went through. But on top of that, like, he'll tell you that being at Harvard set him up for being in New York. Do you know what I mean? It certainly helped.
But he's also like he's a good guy.
No, yes, that's thing. So he's a very down to earth human being.
I say that in the respect that, like,
I've got a lot of love for him. I mean, like, I do.
He's told in a private conversation with me. He said that it opened his eyes going to the high school that we went to, because there was a lot of people there who came from impoverished backgrounds. Like, you'll know yourself that, like, Glasgow, Dundee, North Lanarkshire, and Western Bartonshire, the four most underprivileged constituents councils areas in Scotland, the four ones that voted yes.
Yeah.
So we went to school with loads of people from poor backgrounds, myself included, at the time.
It's Craig Newt and Colton S and the back end of New Mains and all that type of stuff for us, certainly. And it's the same.
And I'm not for Paul, because I think his mum and dad were.
I chose not to say his name, but anyway, I might end that. I know, but they also, he's for Lanark, so in the nicest possible way, he's from the nicer area of the catchment area, as opposed to the lesser area of the catchment area.
He's now working in the legal profession, but is very, very much aware. He's very politically active and politically engaged, and is.
You should listen to his podcast.
Massively aware of inequalities which exist in our society and stuff. So it's like he's going in there with the same sort of ideals as you, that he wants to try and do something about that.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, and it's something that I try and engage as much people as possible. I'm very, very careful. It's harder to do this online than it is in person, but I'm very, very careful to try and engage with people, to try and get my point of view across without. It's very easy to sound like somebody with a chip on their shoulder, like I am angry because my upbringing wasn't like yours. That's not like that.
Things were shite and now I'm here, and because of that
you're going to change everything.
Yeah,
I'm trying to say to people, can you please understand, when you price your law ball at £60 a ticket, or in one law school's example, a 2-day affair where you go away for the weekend and it costs £200 a ticket.
It's an exclusionary practice.
Essentially, it is exclusionary, and whether these societies are officially affiliated with university law schools or not, there's absolutely no doubt that this is being done in the name of that law school, because it's the social event that every law student wants to go to. People queue up for these tickets like a gig. Like, people queue up for them.
That's what I'm saying as well. Do you not think it's also tragic? Because the problem is even though it's exclusionary, I think that's actually probably part of the issue, that they don't perceive it as exclusionary. The problem is they've set this number and they're like, this is what it's going to cost, and it'll cover everything, it'll cover all the costs, make a wee bit of money off it or whatever and that. But they don't even think for 2 seconds that it's exclusionary, because, like, realistically, because of the funding and the money comes in and the support and everything,
and the background that they come from.
In the background they come from, they probably don't need to be charging every single person £200 to do that, but they choose to.
What would be a practical solution to that?
I think that when I've raised this in the past, and first of all, the thing I would say about raising it is you have to out yourself as being somebody who can't afford it. So that comes with stigma within your classmates. Right. But I have raised this in the past, and I've tried to engage with people at law schools in the past in these societies. And normally the thing that they come back with is, but we've got a piper and we've got a photo booth and we've got like a drink. So, and I'm like, well, why not just make it slightly less extravagant? And then we'll make it £25 a head, and then everybody can go.
Nobody that's drunk wants to hear a piper. Nobody uses a fucking photo booth. I hear what you're saying, right? But these are the problems that you've got.
It seems like just thinking about how we could make it more open to all different people. Now, not just people from a poor background, not just people who are care experienced, but you've got people who are at uni who have got dependents. You've got people who are at uni and they might be 45, they might be 50, and this is their last chance to do the career that they want to do, and to exclude them from things just because they have other things that they should rightly prioritise £200 for is just not, in my view, correct. And that's not even like that's just one aspect. You know, I spent £1,100 in books.
Yeah.
You know, I had to get into, even though my degree is free, you still have to take a living cost loan. Now, I have to say, in the Scottish Government's favour, they brought in the care experienced bursary recently. So my last year of student loans was a grant, right? So that's 1 year that I'm debt free, which is great.
Yeah.
But when you're studying a degree like
I wasn't
law,
aware of that. That's a great
it's a brilliant policy. One of the issues I have with it is that it's limited until 26, and I would say that's slightly self-defeating because most care experienced people are likely to have higher education later in life. I suppose that there has to be a cut-off point. I would just make it
a little bit
older to start with. But
at some point, people are going to start taking advantage of it. So like, I'm 45 and I'm going to get somebody to pay for my fucking books. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I think you've got policymakers, you know, and I fully believe that the intention behind the policy is you know, it's well intentioned.
Yeah.
And then it comes to the practicalities, and people have got to say, well, there's got to be a cut-off point. I get that, right? But I think it could be a wee bit higher.
26 is actually the age at the other side, just so we're clear for people in Scotland. I say essentially 25, 26 is what they would then class as an adult student rather than
you become a mature student at 22.
Oh, it's 22. I thought it was 25. Sorry.
Yeah,
I think the 20
because you could be 18 and have done a 4-year degree.
That's the thing. No, I thought I always thought a mature student when you were going through the loan scenario was 25, but I was.
It might be for certain benefits, but 26 is sort of at the same age at which you stop being exempt from council tax. So the Scottish Government have also included an exemption for care experienced people in council tax. Because a lot of time in the past, people have been discharged for the care system, and the council sort of went, right, you're no responsibility anymore, here's a flat, by the way, you need to start paying us rent and council tax. Whereas they have been living, you know, they could have been living under the care of the council for the last 21 years and don't have a clue about how to navigate that system.
Just been kicked off a cliff edge.
Yeah, so that's good, and maybe the 26 comes from that. But if you're studying a degree like law, which has so many financial barriers, where I spent £1,100 in books, you are automatically financially disadvantaged against people, even if you're getting your education for free, because we don't talk about all these other unseen financial barriers.
Sorry, I hope you don't mind me saying, but you were talking prior to starting recording about, you know, what your next steps would be, and part of that, if you want to go into advocacy, would be like unpaid work for about 8 months. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you graduate from your law degree, that's just a law degree. In terms of being a lawyer, you have to do a postgraduate course which is called the Diploma in Professional Legal Practice. That costs at most universities £8,000. Now, currently in Scotland, you can get a £10,000 loan for all postgraduate students, right? $5,500 for tuition fees, $4,500 to live off it. If you're spending 80% of that on your cost, just your tuition fees, then all of a sudden you're at a financial disadvantage again. So this just starts to perpetuate. So what I had to do my law degree was, at the age of 26, I had to give up my flat. I had to throw out most of my stuff because I couldn't afford to put it into storage, and I had to, what I'm essentially doing right now is renting somebody's spare bedroom so that I can afford to put myself into the final education, because if I don't get this diploma, I can't become a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was just going to check. See, for people,
your law degree's kind of useless.
No, but see for people.
I mean, it looks nice on the mantelpiece, but if you want to be a lawyer, you need the diploma, and you need the law degree to get into the diploma.
As a precursor, like for those who are listening who have heard words before, like essentially this is a precursor to what would be passing the bar, essentially. So essentially,
in England, it's called the LPC.
Well, so it's the whole, you've came out of university and then you have that next stage that you have to pass before you're actually a lawyer, essentially. You have your degree.
LPC, I think it's some legal something certificate, legal practitioner certificate, might be right.
Passing the bar, isn't it? I mean, that's the same terminology, isn't it?
In America, it's in America you have to get a degree and then you go to law school, and then at the end of law school you take exams to pass the bar. Slightly different, but it's the
same type of outcome, which is essentially there's a financial impact once you have a degree for you to prove that your degree is worth something, and you want to do your degree.
And this is kind of what I was getting at when I'm talking about structural inequalities in the system. You know, the vast majority of people that have been writing laws in our country for ad infinitum are
That's
Are
good
people-
Latin words. You do well at work.
Are people who
I've seen legalese, by the way. What the fuck?
are people who
I'm gonna make this up.
have been able to afford to, right? So the laws have been written with their worldview in
Yeah.
mind.
And specifically,
Absolutely.
you're actually one of what we're talking about here with you. You're in a fortunate situation when we're talking about it, which is a old school qualification or an old world qualification, which is the same as like being a physician and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And the exact same thing actually, the same problem still exists, which is like if you want to be a brain surgeon, or fuck man, if you want to be a GP, but if you want to be a brain surgeon, you've got this exact same problem, which is
You get the baseline.
you have £15,000, £16,000 worth of books you have to buy,
Yeah.
and you have these events, and you have like, as most of the listeners are aware, and you probably don't know, but essentially like I worked as a senior member of staff in private healthcare for a long time.
Right. Okay.
I'm very aware that like, see who you know in that industry. Like, and I also work for the NHS as well, but see who you know in that industry, that makes a fucking difference.
Yeah.
So like, if you are not if you're not going to the events that the consultants who are like one of the consultants that worked for the company that I worked from was also the head of the Royal College of Physicians. Now, as you can probably imagine, if you can go to the events that he's doing, it fucking absolutely definitely pays your way to be able to get a fucking job in the middle of London.
Yeah.
Whereas in the event you can't, because you can't afford it, you are now a nobody that's getting a degree at the other side of that.
And it's similar in law in that, and it's actually even perpetuated worse in law, because the people who go into the diploma are not guaranteed to get a job, whereas people who study medicine, well, I wouldn't compare the two,
Oh, I mean,
side by side,
yeah,
but people who study medicine are almost certainly guaranteed a job at the NHS, or there's certainly a great deal of there's more chance. When you do a diploma, you can invest that 8k, and then if you don't get a job within 2 years as a trainee solicitor, then you have to do it again. You have to do the diploma again. It's another 8,000. You can renew it, but some people, it just expires and they never get to achieve that dream. So that's scary in itself. I was very lucky in that in my 4th year of law school, a law firm decided that they liked me, and I passed the interview process, and so I got that lined up. So I've got that lined up for when I finish. So for me, it took a wee bit of the risk off of throwing half of my possessions away and gearing up my flat and all that, because I thought, you know what, I'll do it for 9 months and then I'll go into my career.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't.
And you know that you
Yeah. But you shouldn't have to do that.
Exactly. Do you not feel that
And
old world qualifications, much like the law,
Yeah.
physicians, but there's probably more out there that I can't actually think of. There's probably some to do in literature and stuff as well, but essentially anything that would be classed as a kind of a classic university degree, shall we say, that if you have this financial barrier that you have to deal with, like the problem that you've got is like
architecture.
see the reason what I'm essentially getting to is see the reason that all the politicians that you see on TV sound the same way and act the same way and came to the same skills is because they also had to get degrees that qualified them in what was old world qualifications, that meant that even though the Scottish university was paying for Scottish government was paying for you to go to St Andrews, you still had to produce £2,500 to buy all your books for like 2 years and stuff like that, and you had to go through that process, which means that perpetuates a problem where the reason that people always seem the same way and act the same way and come across the same way is because they have to be that way to be able to cover that kind of hidden cost that's not being covered by anything.
And they come from by and large they come from the same background. And like you say, when you study those professional degrees, the thing about law and medicine and things like that is that the textbooks are constantly getting updated. So I imagine if you're studying history, not to demean that as a subject, but imagine you've got a textbook that doesn't really change.
A second-hand history book talking about the Second World War is talking about the Second World War. It doesn't really change.
Whereas for something like law, it's continually being updated. Every class has 2 or 3 textbooks, and you cannot afford. It's so competitive. The job market is so competitive. You cannot afford to fall behind. And just like you were saying earlier, Gerry, when you talk about trying to get to the very top of the profession, so you do 2 years after you do your diploma, you do 2 years as a trainee solicitor. If you want to then qualify as a solicitor, then that's options open to you, and then your earning potential greatly increases. If you want to get to the very top of the profession and become an advocate, and that's the English equivalent would be a barrister, which are people who've got rights of audience and the highest courts.
Guys with the wigs.
The
Wig guys. For those who aren't sure, it's the wig guys we're talking about.
So solicitors can...
For those who can't see Ryan, he doesn't have a lot of hair. I'm starting to question if
That's
this
why
is
I
the
went
entire reason for this career.
To be honest, if somebody said to me, do you want to sit about drinking Advocate all day and wearing wigs, I'd be like, I can do this. I've misunderstood what we're talking about.
I get that quite a lot, actually. Is that why you're in law? No, but see if you want to... So basically, solicitors have got rights of audience in the Sheriff Court only, and Justice of the Peace Court in Scotland. In Scotland, if you want to appear in the High Court, which is the which deals with criminal matters, serious criminal matters...
I really have to interject, because Justice of the Peace Court is exactly what I want to call my next prog rock album, because like, it sounds exactly like a prog rock album.
By the barristers.
Hi man, by the barristers. Now with the barristers, this is Justice of the Peace Court. 13 minutes later.
Yeah, so to get to that top and appearing like High Court, who does murder, rape, armed robbery, serious sexual assault, the top crimes are that are in terms
top
of
crime.
in terms
My
of
favourite crimes. Otherwise, I've got t-shirts for.
in terms of earning potential, certainly the top. And if you want to appear in the court,
Space ones that you earn money off.
And,
sorry.
And if you want to appear in the court of session and do like judicial review and all the top sort of cases, like for example the case that's challenging the UK government, you need to become an advocate, right? So on top of those 2 years of sort of a relatively low paid training, you then have to work for a period that's known as deviling, and that essentially you work for 8 months for free as a shadow to a lawyer, and then at the end of it you take exams. So essentially there's another financial barrier where it's like, well, you can get so far, but see if you want to get to the very, very top, you have to be able to work for 8 months for free.
So that essentially means you guys are working essentially 2 jobs if you are poor. And the nicest possible way, but poor as in not financially affluent, or you have to have enough money available to you at the other side that you can...
But it's
and I don't mean this like a cunt, but essentially like if your mum and dad can't support you to go through those 8 months,
then it's very difficult.
Then it's very difficult for you.
Then it's very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult, and then those people who become advocates are the pool from which judges are taken. So essentially, they become the judges of the future. And I think that what we really need to do is equalise that more. And right now, the Faculty of Advocates, to their credit, have introduced scholarships, and I think they do 4 a year. I'd like to see that expanded, and initiatives like the Law Scott Foundation expanded, so that more people like me have the chance to get to the very top.
Because let's be clear, there should be barriers to being in that position, but the barriers should not be financial.
Exactly. Well, that's that. It should be based on merit. Exactly.
Competence.
That's it. So, like, without incriminating, probably not the right word, but essentially without putting yourself in a scenario where you don't want to be saying like these are all fucking wrong, like 4 people or even 8 people, like it's a gesture, and that's lovely, but it totally doesn't fix the problem. Is probably a nice way to put it, which is like you let 4 people or 8 people enter into that, it's almost like I'm letting them. If you've got 16 people or 32 people, then you're in a scenario where the amount of people who are passing, you actually have a percentage. You can actually say no, 1% or 2% or 3% comes from this background.
Realistically, you're never going to level the playing field in any profession which is higher achieving unless you level the playing field of education across the board.
Can we use essentially what is like what I was using earlier on, which is like classical education, which is there's certain degrees. There's certain degrees in the nicest possible way posh people get by default. I mean, people with cash get, you know what I mean? Like, for the most part, if you've ever worked in healthcare, you've worked with lawyers, you've worked with solicitors, you've worked with people in those type of roles, generally speaking, man, when I worked in healthcare, a guy said to me on the phone, without a word of a lie, said to me, Paul, I don't know if you know what it's like, but like, I'm looking at my window right now and my boat is smashing against the wall, and it's like, I don't know how. I don't know if my boat's going to survive this storm. And I says,
no, I don't know.
I says to him, no, genuinely, I says to him, I'm not going to lie to you. See, if I was looking around there, I could see my boat. Some cunt would steal it because my boat's in wishy. votes and wish you get stole. You know what I mean? Like,
but essentially the point I'm making is that until you address inequality at a base level, and until you have an education system that's like, so I'm not for equality outcome. I'm for equality of opportunity. So everybody should, like, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and I might be completely wrong on this.
it's literally, we're sort of, the problem is we might be biased. It's like a room full of left-wing socialists just like, do you know what more people need? More people need equal opportunities. It's difficult to argue that, you know what I mean?
My opinion is that there shouldn't be private education at all. Like, the education system should be the same for everyone. It should be equally good for everybody.
But you would argue the same with healthcare.
Yes, I would.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that private capital has any room or any
fucking Stalin there in the corner, just like, you know what?
It's got no business. Literally, it's got no business being involved in education or healthcare. In my opinion, I don't know how you feel about that.
You do know how I feel about it, and everybody who's listened knows how I feel about
But
it. I don't know how you feel about it.
What's your
Ryan,
opinion on that, Ryan? Would you think education, is there room for private education in the system or not?
No, I think I would like to see every it being equally good across the board. Realistically, I think there is always going to be institutions that are able to offer that sort of specialised education and charge good money for it. There is obviously political debates ongoing about whether they should have charitable status and whether they should have tax relief and things like that.
You know what? See that political debate? That political debate. The answer to that is no, they shouldn't under any fucking circumstances, because they're not a charity if you're giving somebody an education for cash. Because see, if somebody wants to give me cash, I'll give somebody an education, right?
So earlier on, off mic, we were kind of talking about a few different subjects in around law and stuff, and you start telling us about ACEs.
So ACEs, for people who haven't heard of it, and a lot of people in Scotland will have it. It's a new acronym, and it's not actually that new, but it's became sort of a more prominent over the past 2 years, and it's adverse childhood experiences. Now, there's a really brilliant TED talk by a Dr. Buck Harris. I forget her first name, but it's about 12 minutes long, and it basically talks about the science much better than I will ever be able to. But essentially what it is that if you undergo or suffer trauma as a child, then your natural stress response, so that response that tightens your muscles and makes your heart beat faster and makes you sweat when you see a threat coming.
Fight or flight
mode. If you are continually put into that position as a child, if you've been exposed to violence, if you've been exposed to threats, if you've been humiliated by parents, if you've been exposed to drug abuse, if you've been exposed to tragedy from an early age, essentially that deprograms itself and you find yourself in fight or flight mode all the time, or more often than not. And what the science says is that can have an impact on your life expectancy, your likelihood to develop heart disease and other chronic illnesses, and also your ability to form relationships in the future, because essentially you're almost all the time under undergoing a stress response.
State of high anxiety.
Yeah. So that's a big thing at the moment, and it's a thing which is, I think what it's been used for, or what it's intended to be used for, is to make people trauma informed, they call it. So rather than saying to people like kids, like Wayne's grown up in the scheme, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like that? They're switching that narrative and saying, what happened to you? Why are you acting like that? And it's actually understanding that
people on how to recognise that.
Yeah, and that there's a thing that a lot of people say that are involved in it, say hurt people. So it's like, if you've suffered trauma, you're more likely to pass that on. So I recognise that in my own life, and that my mum had childhood trauma. My mum was a victim of abuse, and that was perpetuated onto me. I'm determined through facing up to what happened to me in the past, and through trying to improve my life, that won't be passed on to my kids whenever I have them. So, but that and working class communities and deprived communities across Scotland, across the world, is being perpetuated through generation to generation to generation to generation, And essentially what it does is lead to, like you were talking about earlier on, low levels of expectation, high levels of imprisonment, high levels of death, and stuff like that. I do have slight reservations over the ACEs movement, and that it's basically the way it happens is you have to take a test, right, and you get a score out of 10. So there's a test you can do online, and I think both of you should actually do it after this, and then you can talk about it in your next podcast about your scores. So mine is 8 out of 10, right, and essentially well, that's it. It's like it's a score, and that worries me slightly.
I mean, it makes it dangerous, right?
It's already been, and I mean, most of the people use this in a well-intentioned manner, but it's already sometimes feels like another thing that's going to pathologise people like me. So I'm damaged because I was in the care system and I was in the children's panel, so I must be a criminal. And then the next thing is it going to be he's an 8 out of 10, so he's going to act like that.
I would actually argue that the number is, like, I mean, not that it's a massive issue, but within its own right. See, because it's 8 out of 10, like, see if it was like, I don't know, it's no equivalent, but see if it was like 60 out of 100, that's something very different, because you're near 50%. The problem you've got is, see something like 8 out of 10 condensed in that way, like, essentially, like, you're only 2 off being a bad cunt. Like, I mean, the nicest possible way, like, I mean, I know it sounds awful, but essentially, like, in such a, like, you use such a small number base for it, and so few questions, and such a result, you're either good or bad. There's nothing in between. That's
the worry. One of the worries for me is that when you start talking about 8 out of 10, it worries me that it becomes a competition as to who's the most traumatised,
who's the most baddest.
Now, absolutely, it should give people an indication as to possible outcomes. If you can see, well, they've got 8 ACEs, then that means that they might be more predisposed to certain mental health conditions, for example. But what I would worry is that if 8 out of 10 started to be a way to be fast-tracked in, say, mental health services, I have had a relatively alright outcome for an 8 out of 10, if that's what we're calling me. But see, if you've got 2 ACEs, so you're a 2 out of 10 on the scale, but your 2 ACEs are severe abuse, sexual and physical abuse, then it's potentially going to have a much more lasting and damaging effect upon you.
There's no weighting on
well, that's it, there's no weighting, and that's it. It's the way that the metrics here that are being presented doesn't actually, I mean, you could have a lot of, and I'm not saying that it actually has it doesn't have a negative impact, but you could have lots of shitty minor things that means that the way that the point scoring system works means that you end up a 7. You could have one particularly shitty thing that means, like, you fucking, some kind of sexual abuse as a fucking child or whatever, but you're low because you've not had anything else. But that doesn't translate.
Yeah, because basically the way it works is just, have you ever experienced this? Yeah. So you could get a high score from having experienced various things once, and have a low score for having experienced one very bad thing lots of times.
You could essentially, I mean, without getting very dark, but I mean, you could be a child that's been sexually abused every single day for fucking 30 years, and you've got 2 on this scale. Whereas you could be someone who has been like, no, you know what I mean? Like, but what I mean is like consistently throughout your entire life. Whereas the other side of the spectrum, you could be a person who grew up for 18 years and in that time, like, didn't get dinner sometimes, or fucking wore shitty clothes, or fucking couldn't buy certain toys, and suddenly you're 8 on that. So, but that doesn't translate in any way, shape or form, because one of them is definitely worse than the other.
What I would say, and like, it's not
saying that the other would no take away.
It's not necessarily my place to be advocating on behalf of this system, but at least they're thinking about it.
Fucking advocating about the system.
It's good in that it's
like a movement towards, like, recognising something.
It's split up into sort of I think 3 categories, which would be, I think, like neglect, and then there's like abuse, and then I think the other one might be like non-physical abuse. I'm not entirely sure, as I say, but it's worth checking out, and it's, I think, ultimately a positive thing. And a lot of the people who are involved in this ACEs awareness, there was recently a motion passed at SNP conference to do a study to see how many people have got ACEs and don't know about it, because there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, I think that's a good thing, because there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the things that happened to me in my childhood affected how my life panned out. It affected my ability to form relationships, and when I look back, particularly relationships, like it was a matriarch figure who finally got me to believe in myself. There's absolutely no doubt that that's got something to do with the fact that my mum, had addiction problems and died when I was young.
Like we identified earlier on, essentially, you had an issue with your mum and with your mum scenario. So the fact that of all the people in the entire fucking world that you could have been presented with who gave you the drive to do something, the fact that it was a woman who was of ages of a mother type figure. Absolutely. If that was a man, or if that was a man, because you don't really have any other races, that's not a transvestite, but if that was a man, essentially, there is an argument to say, right now where you are, you wouldn't be where you are, because if you were presented with a man who was giving you the same piece of information, I wouldn't have had the same impact on your life.
I could have potentially reacted negatively, because I could have said,
well,
I've already got a guy that lectures me.
Negatively, so it actually sounds awful, but certainly you maybe not have reacted positively.
Might not have been receptive.
Which is the opposite side of it.
There's no doubt, and there's no doubt that the adverse childhood experiences or childhood trauma, whatever you call it, causes people to make bad decisions. It causes people to have self-destructive behaviour. And what I would like to see this used as, I think it's a real opportunity if they put this movement, if they put lived experience at the heart of it. So if they get people who have got ACEs or adverse childhood experiences or childhood trauma, and they use their experience to shape that, then I hope that we get to a place where people look at homeless people, there's nothing worse than watching people walk past homeless people and pretending they don't exist, or people who have drug problems, the way that they get demonised in the media, the way that alcoholics get demonised in the media, the way my mum was treated by social workers, etc.
Treated as a criminal,
treated as a villain,
somebody with a public health problem.
Even to a certain extent, the way the current government at UK level treats people who just happen to be poor. We need to get to a more compassionate society, and we need to see people as human beings first of all. And I think that seeing people as potentially the victims of trauma rather than their own misfortune or their own decisions, rather, there's absolutely no doubt
personal agency does come into it.
See, but the problem is I think that unfortunately what you're doing is you're actually saying something that I believe very much so, but the problem is if you relate it to the rest of the UK, or certainly the rest of the general public, the problem is like, see, in the event you start humanising people with problems, you then have to start addressing problems. Whereas, see, if you demonise people with problems,
or dehumanising
them, but then they are the problem.
People are just like,
they're the problem.
Like me.
They're the problem. I mean, the trope you should never go to in any argument as a rule is essentially what was always, as a taste of Nazi Germany. It's that way we say everything is bad. The reason it's bad is because Jews are the problem. Essentially, like. Everything is bad. Scapegoat, which is everything is bad because poor's a problem, and immigrants are a problem, and drug dealers are a problem, and drug addicts are a problem.
There's so much of that in our public discourse at the moment.
Absolutely, definitely. But I mean, the best problem is we're dehumanising humans. We're essentially taking humans and we're saying you don't deserve to be treated like a human, because if I treat you like a human, then my problems are my problem. I mean, I have to fix an issue that I'm being presented with, whereas if you're the problem, then the problem that I have to fix is you're the problem. And that's how.
To qualify my statement, when I said personal agency does come into it, that's not me
hating everybody.
That's not me excusing.
No, this time, people who are listening.
That's not me excusing the way that things are set up. Like, I think that
fucking Marxist.
What I'm saying is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Absolutely, the policy framework should exist that gives people the best possible opportunity to help themselves, and that gives support to people who need it. To me, that's crucial, and it has to be there. And it's not there at the moment, definitely. However, there does come a point where, with all the best will in the world, with all the policy framework in place and with the best possible benefit system in place, there's still an element where you have to get the person, the individual, to make a decision.
Yeah.
To accept their responsibility and to do something about it.
That's a good point, and that's something that I identify in my own life through how I look back on the situation with my mum, and it's something that I've struggled with over the years, and it's something that I struggled with in my own life as well. Is Darren McGarvey talks very eloquently about this in his book about personal responsibility and how it's been sort of hijacked by people on the right.
Yes.
As being like a thing that's like used to justify, slashing benefits and sanctions and all this stuff, which essentially means that we have a system which treats people like criminals, scoundrels, humiliates and starves them just because they're poor.
Yeah.
But that doesn't. But he speaks very eloquently about taking back the term personal responsibility, because it was when my life started. Yeah, when my life started to turn around, it's when I was encouraged to take responsibility for my own circumstances, and I think that there are structural inequalities, and I have faced many of those, and there are people who have got it a lot worse. But it was when I took personal responsibility that I started to make things better for myself. Yeah. So I think you're right, there is always personal agency, but if you're demonising people and you're not treating them with basic humanity, you can't lecture them for 10 levels above them to say you better take personal responsibility for the fact that you've got yourself in that situation. What you need is lived experience, like I was talking about with the ACEs. You need somebody who can go in and speak to people on their own level and say, listen, I know what life is like sometimes growing up in somewhere like Easterhouse.
What's the Alcoholics Anonymous argument, isn't it? It's essentially like, see if somebody hadn't been an alcoholic, they can't ever lecture a person who shows up there to tell them, oh, it's really hard when you drink because fucking it must be. You know what I mean? They have no reference point. It's the same basic principle in the grand scheme of things, just expanded massively across social issues.
And that's it. And that's how some of the people who are most successful in these spheres, violence reduction unit, you have amazing people like James Docherty who works in that. You've got people like Darren who's been helping people in prison and people with addiction problems well before he came into the public eye, because emotional intelligence comes from lived experience.
I will be very specific about a lot of. I will be very specific with most things, but right now I'll be as vague as I possibly can be. So, me and Gerry have close friends who work in addiction services.
Right. Okay.
We'll go as far as that because of what they do, but essentially, they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
But that's only because for a long time they were really fond of taking drugs. So and the thing is, so those people in question have said to me personally, they're like, the people who we work with, almost all of them come from a background of used to take lots of drugs. What that means is when they step into a scenario and someone's like, I'm doing X because of Y, you can relate to X because of Y. See if you didn't, see someone who went into university, came out of university and decided they were going to be a drug addiction specialist and were above the board, and they had never touched anything, they never done anything, they never drank, they can't help. Not saying they can't help that person, that's not fair, but in most cases they can't help that person because they don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get the desire, the drive, the component in your brain that makes you want to chase it. It's emotional intelligence, but that's exactly what I'm trying to get.
And those people have value. The people who are professionals and academics have value, but that value should always be, for me, combined with lived experience, combined with emotional intelligence, and people who can speak to people on their own level.
So one final point I'd like to bring back to something you said earlier that stuck out for me, and again it kind of relates to other conversations I've had with other people, but you were talking about going into the situation at uni and that fear of being perceived as like the working class guy with a chip on your shoulder, and it relates to as working class people. I think we can all be guilty of that, right? We can all be guilty of fucking look at them,
proving a point.
Look at them with their privilege, and we can prejudge people. We can go into situations with an idea of who people are because of how they talk or what we perceive to be their lived experience, and ultimately we have a situation whereby quite a lot of the middle class are essentially on our side. They believe in the same things that we do.
Middle class doesn't exist. Sorry. I had a coffee or something.
They have the same ultimate political ideals that we have, and they want the same policy outcomes as we do. So we have to be able to put ourselves in a situation where we're not adversarial with them. So like, how do we go about achieving that? How do we go about addressing our personal interactions?
But see, I would go straight away and say that I don't think you can. Like, I mean, essentially, for those who are listening,
but like
the people who are here, the reason I'm saying that is because the people who are here right now, for those who are listening who don't know, certain people of the group have different political affiliations as others, right? The problem that I believe you're always coming against is becomes a point scoring exercise. Always. It's got nothing to do with how you can fix a problem. It comes to how the people who don't agree with you haven't fixed a problem.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what first made me actually think about this as a problem, and I was out there.
Was it red wine?
I was building the trampoline.
I've seen that trampoline.
Right,
I understand why you were looking for a fucking plane.
Fucking
communists!
I was building the trampoline outside, right? But it took me like all day. It took me about 8 hours.
Engineer, by the way, for those who aren't listening, paid engineer, can he fucking build a trampoline with instructions?
It just took a while, right? But I had my headphones in and I was listening to the audiobook of
How to build trampolines.
The Road to Wigan Pier, George Orwell, right? And George Orwell was talking about his lived experience of living with working class people in hovels and shit like that, you know, and after the First World War into the like 20s, 30s and shit. But he was talking about the fact that he was 100% on the side of working class people and like loved living alongside them, entirely had their point of view at heart, and believed 100% that they had to be helped and that society had to change to make their life better, but always felt an outsider because of his education, because of the way he spoke and because of who he was, and never felt that he could truly break through to being on a level playing field and a par with them. Again, I'll ask you, how do you think we address that?
That is a difficult one, and the thing about coming across is when I raise these things about, you know, structural inequalities when I'm in that actual system, it's hard not to sound like you've just got a chip on your shoulder and, you know, everything should be changed because you've managed to make it through. What I've always tried to engage with people and try and put my point of view across in a balanced manner as possible, and I think it's about understanding other people's backgrounds are no more their fault than mine is my fault. So it's essentially, it becomes quite reverse in that I found myself at a point where I was fighting so much not to have my background used against me that I found that I would use other people's background against them, and so for example, if we were in an argument and I would just say, you don't understand because you don't understand because you come from a privileged background or whatever, and at the bare bones of it, that's not really any different than somebody saying to me, you don't get this because you come from Easterhouse, or you don't get this because you're care experienced. And I think it's about just understanding that that's not any more their fault than it is mine, and it's about trying to find somewhere in the middle where a common ground where we can engage and we can take forward a common goal without necessarily, you know, speaking the same way or wearing the same clothes or hanging about in the same bars or whatever.
Or like the same music.
But I think education is brilliant for that, because going to university has forced me to interact with people that, you know, that I would never even have spoken to before. And it's you know, I'm going about in a pair of joggies and a hoodie and at uni, and I'm speaking and I'm hanging about with people who are, you know, who wear dress trousers every day, or for example, and see, just getting exposed to people from all different backgrounds, it changes who you are as a person.
Yeah, and that's something that's not spoken about a lot about university experience. Right?
No, because that has been as valuable to me as the education part. See, not just on a class basis, but like getting to know people from all different backgrounds, all different nationalities. That's an amazing experience, and that's the best thing
about
about
you for doing it in
But the thing
your
is,
working life
yeah,
and
could
your
you
personal
not?
life.
Could you not use someone like I think it's Tony Benn, for example, who like came from money, came from smoked a pipe and dressed proper and done all that kind of stuff, but still was a member of Labour.
Socialist.
I was a mad socialist who supported Labour his entire life and believed that fucking the working class people, like, he didn't need to. He could have had a fucking easy life. I mean, he could have get about and smoked a pipe, wear nice clothes and be fucking upper middle class, higher class, fucking that type of fucking landed gentry type, and ran about that and been through that through his entire life. But he's a man who fought for the right to say the fucking working class people. Now, he wasn't a man, like, he has experienced that in his life, and he chose to then accept that, work on it, and take that as part of who he is. But by no manner of means did he have to. Do you know what I mean? He could have literally kicked about, smoking his fucking pipe and wearing nice clothes and done that for all his days, and been paid as a politician in Labour and fucking been paid as a politician in Labour. Do you know what I mean? Got an easy job and easy money, fucking went there after that.
I suppose that's essentially the point I'm driving at. Is like, and I am I'm as guilty.
That's why I'm only using him as an
everybody
example,
else,
because he exists and we can use him as an example.
Don't judge a book by its cover, and I think that's a great piece of advice. Which, to be honest, I can't believe that as a 34-year-old man, it never really occurred to me before that I'm, like a middle class person that's no more the chooser or arbiter of their fucking upbringing than I am. So why should I hold that against them?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's also about, it's another thing that Darren McGarvey talks about in Poverty Safari really well. It's about, you can find common ground with people, and your background doesn't determine your morals. Your morals are determined for you as a person. Growing up in Easterhouse, none of my family voted, right? But I knew we supported the Labour Party. I knew we didn't like the Tories. I didn't really know why. I knew that the Tories had done bad things to us in the past, and that's why we didn't like them. And it wasn't until I became politically engaged later in life that...
Can we just say for any of our listeners that aren't sure, if you're not sure right now, the Tories have done bad things to you, and don't fucking vote for them anyway. Just, if you're not sure. But, you probably... But I'm just saying.
But, I mean, it wasn't until I grew up and I actually started to form my own opinions about politics, and then I started to become engaged in politics, that I realised that I didn't want to vote Labour, and I realised that I could form my own opinions about the Conservatives or whatever. But there's plenty of working class people.
There's no opinion to vote.
There's plenty of working class people in Scotland who decide to vote Conservative, and I think it's about. I personally don't understand it, but each to their own, I suppose. Yeah.
I can only ever imagine it as, like, without being like, I'm not going to go mad anything else, but it is to do with unionism. You know what I mean? Like, it's a unionism mindset to be voting for Conservative. I can't, like, because they are the Unionist Party.
There's no doubt that there's the
Conservative and Unionist Party.
The confluence of the sort of upsurge of support for the Conservative
is to do with the constitutional debate in Scotland.
Yeah. So as a unionist ideology,
I think a lot of people, if you actually a lot of people, if you sat down with them, they would say, it's the unionist part that they care about more than the Conservative part. But I dare say there's a lot of people the other way about, and there's people who are economically and socially conservative, and I can understand that point of view. I can engage with it and I can debate it.
I can bring you people from Wishaw right now who are voting against the Tories because they are voting against the unionism party. Like, I mean, it's like, they don't give a fuck about what their policies are. Like, they don't give a fuck what their policies are. They don't give a fuck what it is that they're trying to say. They're like, we're going to vote against the UK because we are voting against the UK.
Interestingly enough, the decision to include the Conservative and Unionist Party on the manifesto in 2017 was definitely a PR decision, because we actually went
done this. We covered this in one of the episodes.
Downloading every manifesto for every election for the past.
No, we people say, who reads the manifestos? Me and Gerry read the manifestos.
Oh, the last time they called themselves the Conservative and Unionist Party was like
70s, 70s, just to start at 70s.
So they rolled that one out for political gain.
And that's what's happened in Scotland. Most political discourse now begins with are you pro-independence or are you pro-union? And that's maybe
to the detriment of a lot of things.
That's maybe moved on from a class dynamic to a constitutional
dynamic. A weird statistic, see the BNP newsletter that they put out, I don't know, I'll take it.
Are they still a thing?
Well, no, they are, no, but we see when they were putting out the BNP
Barton's trying to absorb them into UKIP at the moment.
So in Scotland, the BNP newspaper had the largest individual sales outside of Ibrox during football games. That was actually a thing. Neither to do with Celtic Rangers, but what I mean is that was obviously a unionist thing and nothing else. You know what I mean? Essentially, people would buy that because it said British on it and it was a unionist thing. That's just statistical fact that that's where they were buying it. That's an unfortunate kind of scenario that comes up. That's because lots of people have that tie into British unionism. Do you know what I mean? So they would buy a bit. I don't believe that most of those people who are buying it hate black people. Do you know what I mean? But lots of the stuff in that was anti-black people or brown people or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Anti-Asians. But they were only buying it because it was British. Because it's British and the so you have to buy it.
You're giving disadvantaged people an excuse.
A scapegoatism, as we were talking about earlier. Scapegoatism, it absolutely definitely is.
So last word to Ryan. What's next? What's next for you? What's your plans going forward, man?
Going forward, so I'm hoping to finish university. Then I'm going to hopefully train as a lawyer. I'd like to practice in the area of human rights, particularly family law. I've got an obvious interest, having been through the actual children's hearing system. I'd like to maybe represent children going through that one day. So yeah, here's hoping it works out. I'm on my last week of uni and then we've got a month off, so I'm looking forward to
Can you not get yourself qualified as something that can fucking protect us when we eventually end up in a legal battle? That would be ideal, because there's going I'm going to get qualified in political libel because Gerry and Paul are definitely working their way towards it.
Well, look, man, very best of luck for everybody, and
Thanks
I've no
very
doubt
much.
that you'll do exactly what you want to do.
Thank you.
Why are you shaking his hand on here? They can't hear that. Shake.
Because I just wanted to.
You can shake his hand when he's not fucking going to walk out the door before we finish recording this.
Right. Well, peace out, guys.
Aye.